Are you looking to be an asset to your team by providing big buffs and debuffs? Are you tired of looking for a group and never finding one? Then it's your time to try out the T3 Dragonknight tank build for the Elder Scrolls Online. Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltiasgaming.com, and I've spent a ton of time underneath my keyboard relearning ESO Dragonknight tanking as it has changed dramatically over the years. This video is going to be an in-depth build on how to set up your support tank so that you have great resource sustain, durability, and important buffs for your party to nuke through PvE content. I've taken this thing through the new Waking Flame veteran dungeons and even the hard modes. I've completed veteran Black Rose Prison, Dragonstar Arena, and many trials. It works in all those situations. So let's discuss exactly what I've learned and how you can use it on your own DK tank. Thanks for watching. Okay, we're here in game, and we're going to start with the biggest change, and that is to the gear and how your tank operates. So the biggest change in Dragonknight tanking in the current state of the game is Frost Staff and how effective it is to use on your front or back bar. Frost Staff is very relevant for tanking. It's going to be even better in the next patch, Waking Flame. Ancestral Knowledge. Equipping an Ice Staff reduces the cost of blocking and increases the amount you can block by 20%. We look at Sword and Shield, increases the amount of block by 20%. So that's the biggest change, and the weirdest thing for me is blocking with an Ice Staff. After you get this passive here, that's going to reduce the blocking cost and increase the amount of damage you can block with. Next up is Trifocus. You can either block with stamina or magicka based on this specific passive. For me, I like increasing my stamina pool, so that way synergies proc increase stamina, regeneration, and resources, so I prefer to block with stamina. If you want to block with stamina like me, you don't put Trifocus in here. If you don't and you want to block with magic on your back bar, you take this passive. So that's the major change that I have come accustomed to, is using a Frost Staff on my back bar, but making it block with stamina. So that way I still have the typical old school Dragonknight playstyle. Okay, Deltia, what gear are you wearing and what type of options do you have? So I'm running 5 heavy, 1 medium, 1 light. Let's start with the main 5-piece, and that's Drake's Rush, found in Black Drake Villa. I was definitely sleeping on this set, but it's absolutely incredible in 4-mans, and that's primarily what I use it for, is very hard PvE 4-player content. Black Rose Prison, Dragonstar Arena, the new dungeons, some of the DLC dungeons that are very, very hard. When you bash an enemy, you and 3 group members, perfect for 4-mans, within 15 meters gain major heroism. This effect can occur every 18 seconds. Why this is so powerful? It's because Dragonnight's resource sustain is tied into ultimate. Also, major damage skills like aggressive Warhorn, which we're going to cover later, is going to boost your damage. Along with everyone else getting ultimate as well, it's a fantastic 5-piece that I totally was sleeping on. I'm going to run infused in the main large pieces, so that's head, chest, and legs with prismatic glyphs, and then sturdy on all the small ones. Yalakrins is a great set for trials in larger group content because it gives you and 12 people minor courage for 15-second, increasing weapon and spell damage. Typically, healers are going to run major courage sets, and the tanks are going to run minor courage sets to keep that spell and weapon damage really high for your group. Keep in mind, the Waking Flame DLC is going to have a 2-piece monster helm that's going to be able to do something similar for 4 people when you have a single target burst heal. So a lot of tanks I foresee swapping this out in the future when that patch is released. A really good starter set if you're new to tanking and you just need something to throw on that's very easy to get a hold of is Eben. This is not as relevant in the current state of the game because we have a much larger max health pool, but 1,000 health for you and 11 group members within 28 meters is very handy. Plus the 2 through 4 piece is very helpful for new tanks. Now for the expensive 5-piece on our back bar, and thank you Guardian Rain for donating me some gold so I could buy this super expensive Ice Staff. When you cast an assault ability, you and up to 5 group members within 10 meters gain weapon and spell damage for 10 seconds. And you'll notice this is not a minor or major buff, so it stacks with minor and major courage. And essentially what you're going to try to do is have your coordinated tanks and healers both give you minor courage, major courage, and this. So 2 people running this set with those other sets to boost everyone's weapon and spell damage very high. I run 3 jewelry pieces with reduced magic, health, and stamina cost glyphs. You can run infused as well. And then your back bar, you're going to have that assault skill, echoing vigor, which I'll get to in a minute. You'll notice what's very important is the reduced target's physical and spell resistance via the Crusher enchant. So the infused trait on our back bar with that Crusher enchant will add to the resistances that we peel off, adding tons and tons of damage to our party. You can be as tanky as you want. Your party can be super tanky and have 70k breath of life, but if you're not killing stuff, it's not going to go well for you. So that's why you set up your tank like this, to provide maximum benefit for your party. And Kratos Behemoth is our 2-piece monster helm that we go with here. And this dealing flame damage, which is easily procced on a Dragonknight, is going to increase the flame damage for people standing in it by 5% and reduce flame damage taken by 5%. Ideal for a trial or group if you're trying to clear content fast. This is also found in Black Drake Villa and pretty easy to get a hold of. So it's very good for trials, again, burning down mobs, especially if you have a lot of magic users. I'm doing very hard PvE 4-player content, and I don't know the mechanics of the fight, and resource sustain is the #1 priority, me staying alive. I go with good old Engine Guardian. It's going to give you 1 of 3 resource pools. It seems to constantly be up every 10 seconds. All 3 resource pools are very useful, whether it's heal, magic, or stamina. This is going to allow me to be very survivable just based on the resource sustain. So I can provide self-healing, I can taunt, I can control mobs, and I don't run out of juice, because that's pretty much the only way I die. Another good group sustain tool is Sentinel. This is very nice because it's going to put a little spider out. It's going to have a pool of resource sustain for you and your group. So if you're looking for resource sustain for your group, Sentinel is a very good choice. Master Sword and Board is going to be up next. On the sword, run Decisive trait, and then a weakening glyph is going to be very helpful. And so what this does is going to deal damage. It's going to heal you, and it's going to give you a ton of spell and physical resistances. So it's very useful for self-healing and self-survivability. So you can see our unbuffed stats here. If we hit balance, which is our armor buff I'll get to in a second, that puts us up at 32k spell and 28k physical. Now, if we hit this again and do a taunt with this, now we're at 36k and 32k. So don't sleep on the master's weapons. They're very, very good for self-survivability. Let's talk about the skills, and I flex a lot of things in and out based on the gear and the context of the situation. So I'll tell you what I flex in and out, working left to right. Unrelenting grip, chains, and what I've been using for pretty much ever on my Dragonknight, and it's a standard. Almost every fight in the game is going to have mobs. This is going to pull it to you. It's going to give you major expedition, making you very fast. The attack cannot be dodged or reflect. That's not really important. What's really important is it's a mechanic to pull mobs away from targets and taunt them. So how I usually do it is pull, taunt, pull, taunt. That way, as soon as the mob comes into you, it's getting taunted, and then it won't go away from you immediately. Next ability up is a staple, and that's Pierced Armor, because it applies minor breach and major breach. Reducing resistance is very, very low, adding a ton of damage, and it costs stamina. Very low stamina cost. So this is a cheap taunt. It has to be in melee range, which is the downside, but you're going to want to keep this up every 15 seconds to increase your group's overall damage per second. Next up is Choking Talons, an AoE and immobilization that also applies minor maim, reducing the damage done by 5% for 10 seconds, and doing a synergy, which is handy. This is not always applicable because there's some fights where it's just single target. Yes, it provides minor maim, but look at the cost. 3,500 magicka in a 6-meter radius. It's pretty hefty, so you don't want to cast a single target if possible. I use this primarily when people are getting overwhelmed and I can't taunt 15 mobs, or it's an AoE situation where we need to lock them into place. If you are doing a single target trial or boss fight, a handy substitute is Overflowing Altar. I use this overflowing altar when we run 3 DPS, 1 tank, and we're trying to do hard mode trifecta veteran dungeons and we don't really need a healer. This is very handy to put down on the ground, allowing your DPS or whoever to proc this synergy and heal very, very effectively. Next ability up is Engulfing Flames. What it's going to do is do an AoE conal flame damage in front of you. So it's going to allow you to proc your Encratis Behemoth along with an Unrelenting Grip and Choking Talons. This is primarily the means to proc it. But you'll read here, effective enemies take more damage from all flame attacks based on your offensive stat with a maximum 10% bonus damage. So if you're running with a mag DPS that has 10% bonus damage, this is not that relevant. But pretty much I run with a lot of Sorks and Templars, so this is very useful because it stacks with Encratis. So Encratis is going to give us 5% flame damage for people that are in this. Engulfing Flames is going to give me 6 based on my stats, or 10 if another Dragonknight's in there. If you have a magic Dragonknight in there and you don't need it, another helpful one is Absorb Missile, just a way to get a heal based on your stamina, so you could flex that in if you needed something more defensive. Our last ability up is Heroic Slash from Sword and Board. This is going to give us Minor Maim, reducing their damage done by 5%, and Minor Heroism. So it's a melee ability that you're going to use on the hardest hitting boss or mob that you can, along with your bashing in between with Drake's Rust, getting major and minor heroism for yourself. So you should be an ultimate generating machine with major and minor heroism up. Why that's so relevant is because Battle Roar, when you use an ultimate, you're going to get a flood of resources, health, magic, and stamina. So ultimate is not only good for damage and survivability, but it's our sustaining tool. So that's why Drake's Rush and Heroic Slash is your bread and butter for sustain. Last ability up is from Earth and Heart Magma Shell. It's basically an oh crap button, and when you activate it, nearby allies gain a damage shield, 100% of their max health for 10 seconds. So it's pretty cheap. I have tried Reviving Barrier, which the damage shield is a bit higher and it heals you and your group members, but it has a 250 ultimate cost. So Reviving Barrier might be nice in specific situations where you know like a Hajimoto and BRP is about to spawn and you're going to take a whole lot of damage, but in general, I leave Magma Shell on. That's my Sword and Board bar. Let's flip to Frost. The absolute most game-changing ability that I found recently is Balance. Oh boy howdy, has this been reworked since I used to play. You get a sacrifice health in exchange for magic. Essentially giving you unlimited magic sustain is how I use this. Another advantage of using this ability is after you do the exchange, you gain your physical and spell resistance buff for 30 seconds. Very, very easy to maintain. So after you do the exchange, it's going to reduce your healing done and your damage shields. But if you're playing with a healer or you have a lot of health, you can easily tap 3 or 4 times and go back to full on your magic, making this an absolute game-changing skill. But it does take some practice to get used to it. Keep that on my number 1 key, and I'm always visually looking. Do I have my major resolve, my physical and spell resistance up? That's your priority in your back bar. Now we're going to get to Inner Rage on our back bar, Undaunted skill line, and I have a Stam taunt on my front, and then I have a Magic Inner Rage on my back. It's basically a very long range, which is the strength of this. The synergy's okay, the magic damage proc, but really it's the range, in that it costs magic versus stamina. So you don't want to go out of stamina, you're dead if you can't block. That's why Inner Rage is useful. Keep in mind, the Destruction's staff Clench with the Frost will also taunt and immobilize enemies. This is going to be much more relevant in the Waking Flames DLC when that launches, if you're watching this video in the past, because it's going to have Major Maim associated with it. So if it goes live and it has Major Maim associated with it, I'm going to flex in Destructive Clench in this 2 key back here, because Major Maim is too much to pass up. Notice that the range is only 15 meters. So you're not going to have the range that you would with Inner Rage. But if this goes live, Destructive Clench, Major, that would give me Major and Minor Maim, Major and Minor Heroism. Gotta have it. Now we're going to go with a Burst Heal from Draconic Powers, Green Dragon's Blood. So it's going to heal you based on the amount of health missing. Meaning, when you're very low health, in the 25th percentile or so, this thing heals like a truck. Very, very useful. It's also going to give us Major Fortitude, Major Endurance, and Minor Vitality. What it's also going to do while it's active is increasing your healing received by 12%. So it's going to stack with minor vitality, meaning you want to keep this up at all times if you can. So your character should have balance up every 30 seconds and should have this up every 23 seconds. And you'll kind of notice it visually, and I'll show you how to play in a minute. Now, an odd offensive skill for a tank to run, well, it was odd for me, is Elemental Blockade with a Frost Staff. Frost Staff here, it's going to apply minor maim for 4 seconds, reducing target's damage done, while wielding a Frost Staff also applies minor brittle for 4 seconds, increasing the critical damage done and the status effects. Now, this isn't going to be up all the time. It's not going to have 100% uptime, but it's nice running on your back bar alongside the Frost Staff because it can proc these status effects. Another reason to run Elemental Blockade on our back bar with our Frost is it gives our enchant, the Infused Crusher, a lot more uptime. It seems to constantly proc it, so you're not having to light attack or heavy attack weave on our back bar. This is primarily used for buffing damage. So if you need more help with survivability and sustain, I would go with Frag Shield because it gives you major mending. Now to proc Powerful Assault to give weapon and spell damage to our party, we need an Assault skill line, which is Echoing Vigor primarily. 2,500 stamina cost is going to heal you and allies within a 15-meter radius for a little bit of health over 10 seconds. So it has a 10-second duration, and Powerful Assault is 10 seconds. So this is tricky to maintain every 10 seconds in back bar swap and cast this over and over. But this will add a ton of utility to your group because you're going to be healing in an AoE for a little bit, but also you're going to be providing DPS with that Powerful Assault going off. Now, Aggressive Warhorn is our back bar ultimate, and what it's going to do for 30 seconds is going to increase everyone's max stats, including max magicka and max stamina, making more damage, but that 10-second major force window, critical damage by 20%. This is the utility big burst ultimate that you're going to want to rotate with your healers, especially that 10-second window if you can. The increased max stats is great, but that major force when you need to burn down something very hard, mechanic heavy, this is when you use it. So typically you coordinate and everyone stacks everything up, you get fully buffed, and then bang, you drop a Warhorn, everyone drops their ultimates, and you just flatten the earth. So that's a long-winded explanation on all the skills and gears. Let's show you how to use this, and then I'm going to show you some clips after we talk about the champion points and miscellaneous on what it looks like live. Pre-buff phase, meaning you haven't started the pull yet. What I typically do is hit balance. That's going to give me my 30-second armor buff. I'm going to hit Dragon's Blood. That's going to give me 23 seconds of increased healing received and a bunch of other things. And then I'm going to hit Resolving Vigor. So left to right, 1, 3, 5, however you set it up on your bar. That's going to proc the weapon and spell damage increase. So 1, 2, 3, I'm going to range taunt as I close the distance. I want to make sure that I get the primary target taunted first. As I close the distance, I'm going to light attack, and then I'm going to put Elemental Blockade down. So if I have those things running, now I have increased spell and weapon damage. I got my armor buff, and for the next, 10, 15 seconds or so, if I need to, I can stay on my front bar. So again, pre, 1, 2, 3, range taunt, light attack, close the distance, blockade. Now I swap. First thing I'm going to do is, yes, the boss is taunted, but I'm going to close the distance and hit pierced armor with a light attack if I can. That's going to reduce its resistances even further, allowing our group to do more damage. And next I'm going to go left to right. So I'm going to do light attack, taunt, light attack, engulfing, and I'm blocking if I see a heavy attack coming in, I don't know what to do. And then heroic slash. So flame damage is going to proc in Kratos. You see that big orange circle? That's in Kratos Behemoth. Anyone in there is going to increase flame damage. I'm going to hit my heroic slash, which is going to increase my ulti gen. I'm going to hit a bash. Hear that sound? See that glowing effect? That's Drake's Rush proccing. You can see my ultimate just blowing up. Now, typically, once I have everything running, all my buffs running, I go to my back bar and make sure Powerful Assault's up for sure, and then I hit a Warhorn. So after I get all my buffs up, then I'm going to hit Aggressive Warhorn so we get that 10 seconds of major crit damage and just nuking things. So again, 1, 2, 3. Now I'm buffed. Light attack, close the distance, light attack, blockade. Okay, I'm taunt, engulfing, proc and Kratos, and I'm gonna bash. So now I have minor heroes and major heroes I'm running. The boss has very little resistances. We got our spell power buffs running. We're ready to rock and roll this thing. Let's talk about the champion points, and the 4 obvious laudables that I'm using are Duelist rebuff in the blue, single target damage reduction, AoE damage reduction, damage over time, very, very helpful in Black Rose Prison, and then Bulwark, increase physical and spell resistance with a shield or frost equipped. Tried to play around with a bunch of them, including some of the ones in healing, to see if that helped, or increased healing done with AoE and single target, but I stick with the obvious ones here. The red tree, there's some obvious ones now, so resource sustain, armor, max health, and I do love expert evasion. I do dodge quite frequently, and so this will save you some stamina big time. The green tree is not really performance based, so I go with the standard fare: Treasure Hunter, Rationer, Liquid Efficiency, and Steed's Blessing. So Munda Stone, I go with the max health, the Lord. Again, unbuffed stats here, 46k max health, so attribute wise, you're trying to get your max health to 45k if you can. The next important stat is your stamina pool to be higher than your magic pool. That way, when you use a synergy like Undaunted Mystic Orb, you see it's going to give you back resources on whichever pool is higher. So we want our stamina higher. That way we can constantly hold block and use our stamina abilities, because we're not using a tri-focus. So I prefer my stamina pool to be higher for that exact reason. And then you're going to dump whatever you have left in your max magic. Depending on the racial choice that you go with is really going to depend on how these actually look. Remember, we don't need a whole lot of magic recovery. Why? Because we're going to use balance and have infinite sustain. We're not going to need a whole lot of stamina recovery. Why? We're going to use battle rush. We're going to use orb synergies for resource sustain, tri potions, popping ultimates, and we're going to be holding block a lot. So stamina recovery is not going to be really a factor anyways. On resistances, you want your physical and spell resistance to be at least 32k each fully buffed. That's an important number to hit. So I run the Bewitch Sugar Skulls for my food, and the health recovery isn't that important, but the max stats is, and that's how you get to those numbers. Racial choice, Norden board all the way. So increase max health, frost resistance isn't that big of a deal. Increase stamina, which is nice. When you take damage, you gain 5 ultimate. This is awesome, because this effect feeds into our battle roar passive, essentially giving us a lot of sustain, and increase ultimate gen means increased damage for you and the group with aggressive warhorn. And then more resistances is always nice on a tank. Some other racial choices that are very useful: Imperial for the reduced cost, including ultimate, especially warhorn. You can also go with an Argonian that using potions and giving you a whole lot of resource sustain. Nord is just very durable, and Norden board just sounds cool, what I love. I'll show you this thing in action, and let me narrate what's going on so you can see it. Does it actually work? Okay, we're on the final boss of Black Rose Prison Veteran, and so I'm going to cut the action here because it gets really, really long. So we're about halfway through, and this is very simple mechanics, but it just basically takes a long time. It's a lot of bashing, a lot of targeting, making sure that you're pointing the boss away from people. So this is the mechanic that people struggle with, is pitting him in the ghost. As a tank, I don't have to do that. Really, what I have to do is make sure everyone's taunted appropriately. And so what I'm trying to do is make sure I don't hit those ghosts. I'm taunting the ads here, and I'm constantly bashing. So your primary goal is to basically debuff all these ads while you can. They're not very hard hitting, but they're slippery. They can get away very quickly. The ads will continue to come back. So I'm putting my blockade. I'm moving the boss in position to avoid the AoE cleave damage. I slotted Ending Guardian because this is very resource intensive, including stamina. So you can see I'm kind of rotating around those ghosts. I'm putting my blockade down to keep that Crusher enchant proc. I'm using Heroic Slash and Bashes in between to get Drake's Rush going. Now the mechanic comes out. I'm going to make sure that I get away from it and continue to bash. That's going to be great for our Drake's Rush passive. And while I'm not taking a whole lot of damage, I'm going to put that blockade down. I'm going to go to my back bar, making sure my armor buff is up. I have that weird glowing effect for Dream's Dragon's Blood. I'm using dodge rolls frequently because I have that expert evasion passive, so I can use one every 30 seconds without burning through my stamina. Again, balance is up. I put my brass down. I do powerful assault to make sure that everyone's getting the spell and weapon damage. And then elemental blockade, powerful assault again. Now pierced armor, heroic slash. So reducing the armor down with elemental blockade, pierced armor is going to add so much DPS. So you can see I'm not just sitting there holding block, mindlessly being a drone. This is quite a lot of buffs and debuffs. You could always simplify this and not be so intensive on this. But if you do it this way and learn to basically be able to apply these buffs and debuffs in kind of like a rotation like you would just a normal DPS, your DPS and your team will skyrocket and you'll never be without a group. These ads are a bit tricky to get a hold of. And so you see I was low on juice, so I applied a Warhorn there, and I got a flood of resource back. Engine Guardian proc stamina, so I know I can get pretty aggressive with my pierced armor and heroic slash. And right there I put engulfing flames up before I bar swap, so I'm going to pull the boss here. Dragon's Blood, elemental blockade, balance is still up, pierced armor, fully charged heavy attack to get some stamina back, and then a heroic slash. So it's basically a rotation like you would do as a DPS while you're holding block. The trick is to drop the block when you know you're not going to take a lot of pressure, specifically heavy attacks. That comes with time and knowing the mechanics of the fight. So you see here, I'm constantly blocking because I don't know the mechanics of the fight as well on this because I've only done it a few times. So we lost a group member, but you can recover here pretty easily. So we're going to do a big old Desti ult here, get those ads down. They're going to be dropping. I'm going to rotate so I can get that cleave damage. And the boss is just about done. So this tank is very, very good at support, but it's not easy to play because you have so many buffs and debuffs. But if you do, it will be absolutely incredible amount of damage for your team. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the ghost mechanic because we lost someone. So I'm going to make sure that we get it completed because we're on the very end. I'm going to grab a sigil. Take me home, sigil. I don't want to do this 8-minute fight again. So I'm going to make sure I get him taunted. Everything's up. So yeah, we got this complete. It should be good this patch and it should be good next patch. So hopefully you pick this up, make some modifications so it fits you. Some of the gear is a bit easy to get a hold of because it's in dungeon. So you don't need to do veteran hard mode trials to get a lot of this gear to be really relevant. So I hope you enjoyed this build. I spent a lot of time on it and I appreciate you watching.